Okay, so you want to own a ranch, your name on the deed, cattle grazing at dusk under a sky that goes all the way to the horizon, a windmill turning somewhere behind you, hunting season coming in and bringing a check with it, your kids learning to ride on land that belongs to your family, the idea of building something that lasts longer than you do. That's a real picture. That's not a fantasy somebody invented. People have built exactly that life. The listing photos are designed to make you feel every bit of it. Almost none of it pays. Here's what I mean. It's August in South Texas. Your water well pump has burned out. You have 200 head of cattle standing around a tank that has gone dry. A replacement pump is going to take 4 days to arrive, and another $8,000 to install. Meanwhile, every cow is drinking from the emergency reserve you were not sure you had enough of. That is not a worst-case scenario. That is a Tuesday. Some ranches build real, lasting wealth. Some bleed their owners quietly while the land itself appreciates. And some destroy people who never ran the actual numbers before they signed. By the end of this, you will understand exactly which kind you're likely to buy, and what it actually takes to end up on the right side. So, let's start with what a ranch actually is, because most people conflate 3 or 4 completely different businesses and think they're buying one of them. The smallest version, call it a ranchette. Anywhere from a few hundred acres to maybe 1,500 is primarily a lifestyle asset with some agricultural use layered on top. You're keeping horses, maybe a small herd, and you are absolutely losing money on the operation while the land appreciates. This is fine if that's the deal you're making. The mistake is thinking it's anything other than that. The mid-sized working ranch, 2,000 to maybe 10,000 acres, is where things get genuinely complicated. This is the version that can stack cattle income, hunting lease income, and recreational revenue into something that at least covers its operating costs in a good year. At $10 an acre for a basic deer lease across 5,000 acres, that's $50,000 a year before you've sold a single calf. The numbers start to look like a business at this scale. The large ranch, 10,000 acres and up, is a different animal entirely. The Wagoner Ranch in North Texas, the largest single-fenced property in the United States, sold for $725 million in 2016 after 166 years in one family. It had 6,800 head of cattle, 30,000 acres of cropland, and over 1,000 oil wells. That's not a ranch, as most people picture it. That's a vertically integrated land and energy corporation that also happens to run cattle. This script covers the middle version, the mixed-use working ranch that a real buyer might actually purchase, because that's where the real economics get interesting. And here's the part nobody says when you're looking at that income breakdown. Every revenue stream on a ranch can disappear in the same year. Drought kills your pasture. Drought kills your hunting lease income. Drought makes your cattle cost more to keep alive than they are worth. Your 3 income streams share one catastrophic failure mode, and it rains in Texas about as reliably as you might expect. So, entry cost. Let's be specific. The national average for pasture land hit $1,920 per acre in 2025, up nearly 5% from the year before. But that national average is a nearly useless number for actually buying a ranch. In the Texas Hill Country, which is what most people are picturing when they imagine owning a place, you're looking at $10,000 to $25,000 per acre once you get anywhere near Austin or San Antonio. Hill country land near Kerrville in the $15,000 per acre range is not unusual today. A 2,000-acre hill country ranch at $12,000 an acre is a $24 million purchase. The same acreage in the Texas Panhandle might be $3,000 per acre, or roughly $6 million. West Texas Edwards Plateau country, where the hunting is serious and the land looks like the movies, runs $2,000 to $4,500 per acre. A 5,000-acre ranch there is a $10 to $22 million decision, and that is just the land. The infrastructure bill starts the moment you sign. Fencing, real perimeter plus cross-fencing on a working cattle operation, runs around $10,000 per mile for a basic 6-strand barbed wire install on flat, manageable terrain. A 5,000-acre square property has roughly 28 miles of perimeter alone. That's $280,000 before a single interior fence. Water wells in West Texas run $15,000 to more than $40,000 each, depending on depth, and a property that size needs multiple reliable water points distributed across the pastures. Then there's the equipment: tractors, trailers, cattle handling facilities, squeeze chutes and working pens, barn and storage structures. Budget $50,000 to $200,000, depending on what the previous owner left you. Cattle themselves, $800 to $2,000 per cow, times however many head your land can carry. But none of that is the trap. The trap is what you find after closing. Ranches transfer with existing leases, grazing leases, hunting leases, water rights agreements that were negotiated by someone else for someone else's operation years ago. You are now bound by those terms until they expire. The hunting lease that pays $8 per acre instead of the $15 to $25 the same property could command with proper wildlife management? You're locked in for 3 more years at the old rate. The grazing lease to a neighboring operator that doesn't allow you to run your own cattle on the southeast pastures? That's in the contract. Read it before you close, not after. Now let's build the actual revenue picture, because this is where owning a ranch starts to look genuinely compelling if you assemble the stack correctly. The base layer is cattle, a well-managed cow-calf operation in a good year, meaning normal rainfall, stable hay prices, reasonable calf prices, can generate roughly $600 to $900 in net income per cow after direct cash costs. At 35 to 40 acres per cow across 5,000 acres, you're running around 125 to 140 head. That's somewhere between $75,000 and $126,000 in cattle income in a year where everything goes right. In a year where the market drops or drought forces you to buy hay, that number can turn negative. The second layer is hunting leases, and this is where the mixed-use ranch starts to dramatically outperform a pure cattle operation. Basic whitetail deer leases in Texas run $5 to $25 per acre per year, depending on county, deer quality, and lease management structure. The hill country average sits around $10 to $15 per acre. South Texas brush country, where the genetics are serious and hunters pay accordingly, pushes well past $25 per acre. If you're running a high-fence exotics operation, axis deer, aoudad, blackbuck, you can see $50 to $80 per acre or more on the right property. On a 5,000-acre ranch with quality managed habitat, a single hunting lease at $15 per acre is $75,000 per year in nearly passive income. The third layer is recreation and agritourism. Wedding venues and retreat bookings on scenic ranch properties pull $5,000 to $20,000 per event. Glamping setups on hill country acreage can run $300 to $600 per night per cabin for a handful of units. This layer requires active management and has meaningful liability exposure. You need specific insurance the moment the public sets foot on the property, but the per-acre return can exceed what cattle produce on a fraction of the land. The fourth layer, and this is the one almost nobody factors in when they're running the initial numbers, is direct-to-consumer beef. Ranch-raised grass-fed beef sold through farmers markets or a CSA box or a website can move at $8 to $15 per pound retail. The same calf you'd sell at the auction for $1,100 might yield $4,000 or more if you finish and process it yourself. The processing cost runs $1.50 to $2.50 per pound, so the margin isn't automatic, but the upside is real for a ranch with existing cattle infrastructure and a population center within a 2-hour drive. Here is the number that looks reassuring until you understand what it doesn't capture. A 5,000-acre mixed-use ranch stacking all 4 layers in a strong year might gross $250,000 to $350,000. That works out to roughly $50 to $70 per acre. And ranch analysts and brokers will show you that number with real pride. What that number does not show is that almost every dollar of it is conditional on the same variable, whether it rains. Running a ranch costs money every single day regardless of what the weather is doing. Property taxes, even with an agricultural exemption that appraises the land on its productivity value rather than its market value, can run $10,000 to $30,000 a year on a mid-size operation. Without the ag exemption, that number can be 3 or 4 times higher on hill country land valued at $15,000 an acre. Getting and maintaining the exemption requires proof of active agricultural use, minimum 5 head of cattle on the property for a set period, or an active wildlife management plan. Let the exemption lapse by neglecting those requirements, and you can be hit with back taxes going 5 years. New owners discover this after they stop actively farming because they assumed the exemption transferred automatically. It does not work that way. Insurance runs $3,000 to $10,000 annually for basic property, liability, and livestock coverage. Equipment maintenance eats 20 to 30% of your total equipment value per year, and a well-equipped 5,000-acre operation is carrying $150,000 or more in tractors and trailers. A full-time ranch hand, if you're not running this yourself, costs $35,000 to $50,000 a year plus housing. Infrastructure, roads, fences, water systems requires a consistent capital budget of roughly $15 to $25 per acre per year just to maintain what already exists. A 5,000-acre ranch running cattle plus leases is spending somewhere between $150,000 and $250,000 a year before the cattle themselves cost $1. And now for the mechanism that makes ranching more fragile than any of those numbers suggest. The cattle operation and the hunting lease and the grazing all share one input: grass. Grass requires rain. When drought comes, and in Texas, drought comes reliably once or twice a decade and sometimes lasts for years, the grass dies, and the cascade starts immediately. You're buying hay at prices that have doubled or tripled because every other rancher in the region is buying it too. You cannot stock the hunting lease at the normal density because the deer are moving toward wherever there's water, and the critical decision arrives fast. Do you buy hay at $250 or $300 a round bale and try to carry the herd through? Or do you send your breeding cows to auction at distressed prices when every other rancher is doing exactly the same thing? If you sell the herd, the cash flow problem is solved for 1 year, but a cow-calf operation takes 5 to 7 years to rebuild from scratch. You liquidate into a broken market, you wait for drought to break, you pay for grass and maintenance the whole time you have no cattle, and then you repopulate at higher prices. Texas livestock losses from the 2011 drought alone were estimated at $3.23 billion. That was one drought year. In 1876, a man named Charles Goodnight drove 1,600 head of longhorn cattle into the Palo Duro Canyon in the Texas Panhandle and built a rough camp in the shelter of the canyon walls. He knew what he had found. The canyon protected cattle from winter storms. The Caprock Plateau above offered summer grazing that stretched to every horizon. The first 12,000 acres were bought for $0.75 per acre. But Goodnight didn't have the capital to scale what he could see. He met an Irish financier named John Adair on a buffalo hunt in Colorado in 1874. Adair had money. Goodnight had operational knowledge and the best piece of ranch land anyone had found. Their deal was simple. Adair would furnish the capital, Goodnight would manage the operation, and they would split the profits. In 1877, they formalized the J.A. Ranch. Within 5 years, it had grown to 93,000 acres and turned a profit of $512,000. By 1883, the JA encompassed 1,335,000 acres and ran 100,000 head of cattle across 6 Texas counties. That is the version of this story people remember. Here is the version they usually skip. Goodnight was the most skilled rancher in the Texas Panhandle. He invented practical innovations that the entire industry adopted. He saw the end of the open range coming before anyone else did, and started building barbed wire fences in 1882, the first panhandle rancher to do so. He understood the land the way almost nobody else did, and he ended his years having been forced to deed away his own ranch to a friend just to keep a roof over himself and his wife. The cause was a side investment in Mexican silver mines that failed spectacularly and left him personally ruined. He died in 1929, having helped build what may have been the most efficient large-scale cattle operation of the 19th century, and having seen almost none of its compounded wealth in his own life. The JA Ranch is still operating today, still owned by Adair's descendants. The capital owner and the operator are almost never the same person. That pattern has not changed. What Goodnight's story shows, and what the 2011 Texas drought and the 2022 Texas drought and every drought before them shows, is that the ranching operation is not the business. The land is the business. Cattle, hunting leases, recreation, these are the income streams you use to offset the cost of holding the land. They are not, in most cases, the thing that makes you wealthy. So, who actually comes out ahead? The buyers who profit most from ranch ownership are not primarily cattle operators. They are high net worth individuals with capital gains somewhere else who need a place to put those gains without paying tax on them today. Under Section 1031 of the Tax Code, a provision that has been in the code since 1921, you can sell any investment property and roll those gains into ranch land without paying capital gains tax at the time of the sale. A tech founder who sells $10 million worth of appreciated stock and rolls it into a Texas ranch has deferred the entire capital gains bill. The ranch's cattle losses, which are almost guaranteed in the first few years, become deductions against other ordinary income. The operational losses on a ranch are not a bug for this buyer. They're a feature. Layered on top of that is the conservation easement, a landowner who grants a permanent easement to a qualified land trust, restricting development on part or all of the property in exchange for the right to keep farming it, can claim a charitable deduction worth up to 50% of their adjusted gross income for up to 15 years. On a $10 million property, that deduction can be enormous. The IRS has scrutinized abusive conservation easement arrangements aggressively in recent years, so this requires careful structuring. But for a legitimately managed ecological or agricultural easement, the tax math can be staggering. And underneath all of this sits the Texas Agricultural Property Tax Exemption, which appraises the land based on its agricultural productivity rather than its market value. A hill country property worth $15,000 per acre on the market might be taxed as if it's worth $800 per acre under the ag exemption. On 5,000 acres, the difference between those two tax bills is often more money per year than the cattle operation generates. For this buyer, the ranch is not a ranching business. It's a tax-advantaged real estate holding that also happens to have cattle on it because the cattle are what maintain the exemption status. So what does the honest year actually look like? Here's the real accounting. Both versions. A good year on a well-run 5,000-acre mixed-use ranch in Texas. Cattle net income around $90,000. Hunting lease income around $75,000. Recreational revenue around $40,000. Operating costs of $180,000 to $220,000. Net cash flow somewhere between a slight loss and roughly $25,000 to $30,000 positive before debt service. If you finance the purchase, that debt service wipes you out entirely. The land, meanwhile, appreciates at 4 to 5% per year in the current market. On a $12 million property, that's $480,000 to $600,000 in paper wealth generated in a good year, from appreciation, not from cattle or leases. A bad year, meaning a drought year, which is not an unlikely year, it's a cyclical certainty. The cattle operation goes negative, hay costs explode. The hunting lease may stay intact, but deer density drops. Your operational cash deficit might be $80,000 to $150,000 before you start making decisions about the herd. If you bought the property with meaningful debt and no other income to absorb those losses, this is the year that forces your hand. What determines which year you're living? Three things. In order: your debt load going in, your cash reserves available to survive a 2-year drought, and whether you are buying this ranch with income you need from the ranch or with capital you can afford to let sit. That last question is the one most first-time buyers do not ask honestly enough. A ranch is not a passive income vehicle. It's not even a reliable active income vehicle. It is a land holding wrapped in an operational business that obscures what the asset actually is, which is real estate in one of the most consistently appreciating rural land markets in the world. The people who see it clearly buy the land, keep the cattle as a mechanism to maintain their tax exemption and offset other income, treat the hunting and recreation as cash flow icing, and never rely on any of it to pay the mortgage. The people who see it less clearly fall in love with the picture: the windmill, the cattle, the dusk, the brand on the gate, and build a business plan around a set of income streams that all go dry in the same summer. The land is always the business. The cattle are the cover story.